Friends, we're so excited for today's conversation with Jay Stringer. Jay is a licensed mental health counselor, researcher, and speaker who helps people talk about some of the really big questions. If we have spent any time together personally, I've told you about his previous book, Unwanted, that's all about navigating unwanted sexual behavior and how we can really understand how sexual fantasy can set us free, and understanding some of our childhood stories and how that impacts our attachment and how we show up to romance and sexuality in our everyday life. But his newest book, called Desire, which actually is releasing today, we get to celebrate together, is all about the longings inside of us and the new science of how we love, heal, and grow. This conversation was so impactful as we talk about desire as a broader context, not just sexual desire, but we also got to dig into some of those questions. Is what does sexual desire get to look like in dating relationships for men and women who are pursuing abstinence and also live a really embodied life?
Yeah, I so appreciate in this conversation that we're able to think about God giving us desire, like life force in so many components as part of how he helps us discern the path that he has us on for our kingdom impact and for our our life vision. So I'm super excited about getting to share this episode with you.
Absolutely. This is going to be one of those books that you're going to want to keep a highlighter or a pencil nearby. And
For
so it
sure.
is out today. So you can go ahead and order it. In the show notes, there will be a link for you to grab it on Amazon or wherever you listen. Also, Lauren, I don't know if I told you this, but there also is a workbook that goes along with this book
That's
that people can
awesome.
work through that has really great conversation starters for you and your friends, a church small group, great resources. And so that'll definitely be some of the work that we're working through. And I want to invite you into that as well. Welcome to the Dating and Desire podcast, a place for conversations and resources on sexual formation for adult Christians.
I'm Lauren Matthews.
And I'm Bridget Blood.
Together, we combine our years of ministry experience and time as certified coaches, helping men and women just like you navigate dating in a way that honors your core values.
Each week, you'll hear us talk to therapists, pastors, coaches, and other leaders in the field of sexuality and relationships.
While we acknowledge believers hold various perspectives on this topic,
we're gathered around the belief that our desire is holy,
our body is good,
and our story matters.
Let's dive in.
Jay, so glad you're here with us today.
Bridget, Lauren, it's so good to be with both of you. Thank you for having me.
All of our listeners know and friends that your work has been so pivotal in my life and just the way I've engaged my own story. And it was funny. I was at church the other day and they asked me what I do for work. And so I was sharing with it and he goes, "Do you know Jay Stringer?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm familiar with his work." And he goes, "I drove him in Nashville one time years ago because I was the podcast, I forgot what he was, like the podcast editor or something where he needed to carpool you somewhere." And he said, that conversation has changed my whole life. And he just talked about the fact that our desires, our fantasies, our longings in life really shape us. And it was just amazing. And I'm like, yep, that seems like that describes Jay perfectly of that one little moment. So it's just kind of sprinkled all over.
Vague memory. I'm trying to remember. I remember a couple car rides like that, but it's so good to hear about.
Yeah. I love it. And I think that's the cool part of the work that we feel so passionate about here on the podcast is the fact that our stories really matter. And we call it Dating and Desire because we wanted to actually awaken people that dating wasn't this thing we had to have all these weird rules about, or this very religious, you ask this question, you go on this date, and then you got to figure out this, and you got to have an angel fall out of heaven to confirm your spouse and all these weird, crazy things. But that we actually can feel safe in our bodies and we can trust that our desire is good. We often say that our desire is holy. And yes, we're talking about sexual desire, but we're also talking about the energetic force inside all of our lives that moves us towards awe and beauty and play and all the good things. And so you have a brand new book coming out when this podcast releases. And so would love for you just to kind of share a little bit about your brand new book, Desire, and why it's important that we understand that desire is about so much more than sex and how it moves in our life.
Yeah. So with Unwanted, part of what, inspired me to write that is that, I had so many clients as a psychotherapist and even my own journey to outgrow porn. There were just so many difficulties that people were facing with a lot of shame, a lot of judgment. And so part of what the research began to show is that these patterns of behaviors, these porn searches were not random at all. They were actually a window into someone's story. And so,
Mhm.
it, I think, struck a nerve in people. I remember after I wrote one blog entry, we got like something like 100 requests for therapy off of one
Wow.
blog.
Yeah.
And what that showed me was not that the writing was good, but people were just like so curious to begin to engage their desires from a very different standpoint. So Unwanted was set out to, change the conversation with regard to how do we approach unwanted sexual behaviors. But then we started getting more emails from people saying, essentially, this has been really helpful to help me to understand an unwanted destructive pattern in my life, but I'm still stuck in the same marriage. I feel like I'm still stuck in the same story. I'm still stuck in this kind of sense of that my life has no purpose to it. And so I
Mm.
started realizing that we're not just helping people to outgrow a single pattern. We have to go deeper to get to that life force of desire itself. And so sometimes when you hear that word desire, people immediately think like sex and arousal. And as you just said, desire is so much more broad than that. And so some of us think that we have too much desire because we have too much sexual arousal. And
Mm.
on that note, I would just say it's not possible to have too much sexual desire.
Yeah.
It is possible to have a lot of sexual desire that's not formed,
Mhm.
that's not developed. But underneath all of that is this sense that desire is this amazing life force that we have to develop. But part of what happens is that you end up over indexing in one area of desire at the cost of others. So in desire, I'm working through these 5 categories of desire: a desire for wholeness, a desire for personal growth, a desire for intimacy, a desire for pleasure, and then a desire for meaning.
Mm.
And part of what I see all the time is people over index in one. They
Yeah.
get really passionate about their careers, but they don't know how to do intimacy. Or you have a lot of people that love sex, but they don't have any differentiation, or they really
Yeah.
don't know how to do intimacy and mutuality. They just have
Mhm.
strong sexual desire. So
Yeah.
part of what this book is really an invitation to is you can't just develop one area of desire. These are not a la carte menu options that you get to pick or choose. You've got to develop the whole thing.
That's so good. One of my favorite stories from the book that you share, and I can't remember which desire category it fell under, but the man who wanted to make cinnamon rolls because his dad wouldn't make them when he was a kid. And I think sometimes when we talk about like, oh, I want to be a person that engages my desire well, like that feels so like ethereal of sparkly, but it can be those small embodied practices of wait, like I really longed for I think about like a ritual from my parents growing up. We would make SpongeBob pancakes on Sunday. And so it's like it was literally like my dad would like, use food coloring and change them. And it's like there are sometimes like I think like last week I was like, oh, I just really want pancakes. I'm like, okay, well, what's for? And I was reading through them like, okay, well, what's forming that? It's like, oh, like I actually am missing my parents. Like I'm
Mm.
missing that
Home.
small feeling of like being with them. And I had these incredible like pancakes at my sister's wedding. And so I always think about that moment with it.
Mm.
So it's like it's shaping so much more than, oh, I want pancakes. And that kind of that story, the cinnamon roll story, helped me see that my desire is not random and that it really matters and it does impact all of the areas of my life.
So good. And that's the invitation, is to go back to some of those raw childhood desires where it's like, what did you love as a kid?
Yeah.
And some of
Mhm.
us remember, like, I want to be like Mike. Shout out to Lauren and Chicago. But like, you want to be like Michael Jordan, or you want to be like Sally Ride or Laura
Yeah.
Ingalls Wilder and grow up in another
Yeah.
time. Those desires are early seeds that you get to develop in adulthood. But at some point in your life, you may have wanted to be a piano player, guitar player, and then you realize, like, I'm not going to be Bono, I'm not going to be
Yeah.
successful. And so you let some of those innocent childhood desires die, and then you
Yeah.
become essentially a stranger to that childhood self. And so I think part of the invitation to desire is to say, like, where was their play? Where was their delight? Where was their innocence? And
Mm,
might that child actually have something to say to you? Might that child want to wake you up and stir you? And I know we do
mm,
a lot of inner child work and kind of go back. And I'm always ambivalent about inner child work because it sounds like so much pity that you have for this
Mm.
young
mm,
child inside of you. But I'm like, as I have gotten to know young Jay at like 6, 7 years of age, like that kid has so much desire, so much
yeah,
longing. And certainly by middle school is dealing with a lot of trauma, bullying,
mm,
and shame. But before some of that arrived, this kid loved people. He loved food. He loved being alive. And
yeah,
now I have to reckon with that kid had so much life. Why do I lack the life that I had as a kid?
yeah. It's good.
It feels like you're speaking, you're inviting us to not mature out of those simple, playful, light desires and rather see them as windows into, or maybe even trailheads, the beginning of paths to who we are in a most fundamental level. I love that.
Yeah, so much so. I mean, I think like just that sense of one story that I've been thinking about a lot from my childhood is I would get so excited for like barbecues when my dad would kind of get the Weber grill, the charcoal
Mm.
briquettes, and that would start up. I would get like bowel movements because I'd get so excited as a kid. And I used
Yeah,
to like
Yeah,
make up all these songs about hamburgers and ketchup and mustard and
I
like
love it.
just like loved a good burger as a kid. But then in middle school, too long of a story to tell, but it was bullied for my weight and called
Mm.
donut and just ridiculed. And so a civil war developed inside of me with my desire for food. Like desire for
yeah,
food was this place of deep comfort and life, but also the thing of deep shame, but also the way that I tried to soothe myself in the absence of having a mom and a dad that were really involved with my soothing. And so that ambivalence is what we all carry with regard to desire. Like desire is responsible for all the best food in our life. It's also responsible for our eating disorders. Desire for
Mm.
sex is what allows us to, leave our parents' home, to risk, to be able to develop intimacy with others and relationships. But it's also the thing that can open the door up to heartbreak and betrayal and loss and a breakup. And so all of us live with something of a civil war with regard to our desires. And the dilemma that I kept coming back to was if you grow up in a conservative culture, you are taught to suppress your desire because it
Mm.
might make you selfish or, God forbid, sexual. But then the progressive way of life is like, just follow your heart. Like, what do you want to do with this one
mm,
wild, precious life that you've been given? Which I love
mhm,
that line from Mary Oliver. But there's
mhm,
no practical guidance on how to actually follow your heart and develop it. And so part of what I realized was missing with desire is like there's no really invitation to form your desires,
mhm.
because not all desires need to be followed. Not all
Yeah,
desires need to be
it's good.
suppressed, that there are clues and data embedded within the desires that we have in our life. So I really want people to have curiosity of you don't have to follow every desire. You don't have to dread the desires inside of you either. They are working for you if you learn how to pay attention to them.
It's
Mhm.
good.
Yeah. I know you mentioned like the civil war inside of us, with the ways in which our desires manifest really beautiful things or remind us of great things, and the ways in which they also can be avenues for dysfunction. And when I think about our audiences and daters and people who are single or dating, and the process of getting to know someone with whom you're going to risk and um, begin a new life, start a new family with. I think about the conflict sometimes that comes up around our parenting relationships. I'm sure you're very aware of this, but I hear a lot. Either people are cutting off their families, their parents in particular, feeling like the need, um, the things that they're walking into can't include their families of origin or parents. Or I hear people, especially in very religious circles, maybe over indexing maybe leaning toward enmeshment, but over indexing on parental importance. And our audience is adult daters. So we're not talking about like in high school or something like that. So with that um, little driveway, I wonder what you would say when you think about people who are adults and are dating. What can a healthy relationship with your parents look like while you are doing this process of getting to know someone and determining if you're going to join with them and start a family?
Lauren, just even as you talk, my body wants to run away from this conversation. Like I
Oh
have so
man.
many memories coming
Mm.
back. And let me bring you a little bit into one. So I would say, just kind of background would be my provisional self in my family was to be really good for my mom and my dad. That the more theology books I read from my pastoral dad, the more our relationship thrived, the more that he felt just kinder, more settled around the house. The more that I attended to some of my mom's emptiness and disappointment, the less angry she was around the home. So my provisional self was always around trying to be good for my parents. Like, what do they want? At some point in my life, I realized I needed to kind of leave my family of origin in a really healthy way. But then I remember dating one woman at one point in my adult life. And then my parents said, like, in kind words, but also like, what are you doing? Like, she's more like Teflon. And I remember in this moment feeling deep ambivalence because, on one hand, I knew that they were right, but I was also like trying to break out of a mold of
Yeah.
just being the good kid all the time. And there was actually
Hmm.
something about this person that possessed more honesty than anything that my family was willing to hear. So, this
Yeah.
sense of, but there is a Teflon like quality here. And so that sense of like, I don't know what to do with my parents' voice that has been over authoritative throughout my life. Then I started dating, a couple years later, started dating my wife, Heather, and they loved Heather. And I loved Heather. But then I was deeply conflicted. I'm like, wait, am I missing
Yeah.
something? They like my my girlfriend right now. And I got to differentiate from their opinion. And maybe I've got this wrong. And so that was just wildly confusing. But the dilemma with parents is that, you have some people that need to leave loyalty to their parents. And I
Mm.
would say everyone will have to leave loyalty to your mom and your dad. And there's two types of people here that I'm thinking of. Some people, that's going to be really hard for them because they had decent parents, or maybe they
Yeah.
had a parent that was in some difficulty, mental health, physical health, and they need to be good and loyal to them. So the prospect of leaving them is so hard because they are enmeshed in that family system. I work with, people from all over the world, but some of the hardest people in this conversation are those from the Midwest.
Mm.
And the reason for that is they will talk about, I'm like, what are you going to do for the holidays? And they say, well, we're going to go to Minnesota and we're going to go see my parents. And it's like, why are you going to see your parents? And they'll tell you, well, if we don't see them, they're not going to see their grandkids and we can't deprive them. And it's like that they have sacrificed their children for their
Mm.
parents' emptiness. And so that's really hard to leave. But I know that there are people that are listening that they're on the other end of the spectrum and they do not like their parents at all. And they're like,
Yeah.
leaving parents, that's so easy. And
Yeah.
yet the much harder work is actually for them to get a sense of how are they loyal to their parents, even though they don't like them. So let's say
Mm,
you had a parent that wasn't kind to you, that wasn't supportive of you, and you learn to self soothe through porn, or you learn to
Yeah.
self soothe through a lot of alcohol or video games. Your loyalty to your family is still playing out in your adult patterns, is that you
mm,
don't go to relationships. You develop something of an avoidant attachment where I don't want relationships, intimacy to be messy. I just want things that are easy and flow relatively normally. And so that sense of like them leaving family of origin is much more difficult for them because they have to learn how to grow in intimacy, which is something that they never learned in their family of origin. So
Yeah.
it's complicated for all of us. And but I think of, you know, Jesus's phrase that unless you hate your mother and father, you cannot follow me. And then, you know, in Genesis 2, for this reason, a man will leave his mother and father. And so if you do not leave, you cannot create a good marriage. And so that's radical.
Yeah.
When
Mhm.
you get married, you are not creating in addition onto the Stringer family, or you're not
Yeah.
adding to your father's house. In many ways, you are creating a new family unit, a new way of, you know, being together as a family. So that is so difficult for people, is
Yeah.
to sever or old loyalties so that new ones can begin to emerge.
I think about you saying Genesis 2 and leaving and cleaving. It's really wild, Jay, to imagine that phrase to the cultural unit of that time, right? Because that word was given in a time where people weren't buying their own house in a different village. Like mom, dad, grandma, uncles, everybody's in the same small house. And yet the wisdom of God is you have to leave your parents, even though you're in the same house, and cleave to your wife to develop this other thing.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's it. What you just said is so true. Ancient Near East, like I think of Jesus saying, you know, for I've gone to prepare a place for you. In my father's house, there are many rooms, but it's the same imagery that in the ancient Near East, you would build an addition onto your father's home, essentially. And that's where your marriage would begin to play out. So that separation has very little to do with geography. It has everything to do with emotional, physical, spiritual separation from your family of origin. And that's what's essential to have a good marriage, is you have to look at what are the patterns that I'm leaving behind. And that's
Yeah.
where I think it comes back to honor and honesty, is that there are certain things about the Stringer family that I need to honor about who my mom and my dad were. But I
Mm.
also have to be deeply and uncomfortably honest about the difficulties in my mom and dad that I want to never reintroduce into my family today. So that's the radical call, is honor your family of origin, but also leave them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, what comes up is just kind of this weird tension that for our audience they sit in is a lot of like the window between leaving and cleaving is a really big window. When we
Yeah.
look at kind of the original of like, okay, I'm leaving my parents at 18, I'm going to college for 4 years, I'm getting married. Well, when you're 37, 42, 52, and you're still operating as a solo adult, like that choice to differentiate holds a different level of suffering than if we were partnered earlier in life. And so, you know, I think through that, and I know I love that you mentioned it, and I do talk about this with people a lot of sexual loneliness is a great reason to pursue marriage, but not the way that we typically talk about that in the Christian context. Because typically how we talk about that is like you just can't control your lust, you're going to, you know, burn and die, and so you need to get married. And then we end up in these horribly immature, relationally unsafe, sexually insecure marriages, and we go, "Oh, well, we followed the commands of God, they got married." So that's not what we're talking about, but I think there's also something in when we look at desire as a whole. Often I'll use the idea of helping our bodies move through a cycle of desire, creation, completion, which of course is how our body is designed in sexual arousal to move us towards climax, to move us towards completion. But like, how do we fill our whole life with? You have to have experiences of I have a desire to do something. I do something with that desire. I create something, whether that's breakfast or a workout or a piece of art or listening to music. But then it has an end to it to help my body go like, whoa, there's so much in life as a single person where it feels like there's a lot of desire that has no end. And
Hmm.
so helping people create those like small rituals. For me, I really like doing vision boards. They've been really important to me. It was one of those weird things that came up that I did it once with a girlfriend one January, and now we do them every year. It takes us like 6 hours, and we spend all day in our sweatpants, and we have a movie watching, and we do it. But even like making those throughout the year, and just my journal of I have prayers that I physically like don't know how to put words to, but I feel like my body has to move this desire somewhere. And so what do I do with it? And so, yeah, that's just, Lauren called it the driveway of like, just a lot of thoughts that come up of, yeah, there is this weird thing when you are single longer that there is this, I have desire to build my own family, but for whatever reason, that's not happening right now. But yeah, I still want to be connected to my family and I still want to honor my family, but also I'm leaving with the hope of I'm building healthy habits in all areas of my life to bring a partner into. But that is a uh, desert sometimes, of desert of just
Yeah.
longing of going, I don't know what to do when I'm leaving and I'm not leaving yet.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So part of the way that I think about this is like, Dan Siegel would say like two of the deepest desires of being human are a desire for authenticity and connection. So he would say the strongest systems in the world are those that are differentiated and meaningfully linked together. So that's a sense of, think about like an airplane, that the reason why an airplane is so remarkable is that it's the engine, it's the fuselage, it's the wings, it's the control panel. But the glory of an airplane is not just in the wings or in the engines. It's somehow all of this comes together. And so that can often be, just that extended period of agony is that like for some of us, we are really trying to be authentic with our life. It's
Yeah.
a sense of, I don't want to settle. I don't want to find, a person that just, I'm empty. So therefore I'm choosing this person.
Yeah.
And so I want to bring my authentic self to the world, but I also want to deeply belong. But the dilemma for a lot of us is that the more authentic we are, the less we feel like we can belong. So, I mean, I've heard from so many single women that the sense of when they begin to have a strong voice, when they begin to have a sense of direction and understanding and differentiation for where they want to go, there's a sense of like almost abandonment because of their strength, and then it gets mislabeled, not as confidence, not as a delight in oneself and the
Yeah.
talents and gifts that God has given to them. And so that sense of you can be authentic, but you won't belong. And then for,
Yes.
I think maybe our parents' generation, there was a sense of like, we don't really care about authenticity as much, just belong, like find unity, get together, be good for your family, be good for your church, and then everything will be okay. But then something inside of you needed to die because you realized that
Yeah.
you weren't authentic. And so that's the razor's edge of all relationships and family and friendship and intimacy is I want to deeply belong to this person, to this group of friends, to this church. But the more that I am authentic and speak to things, the less of a place I appear to have. And so
Yeah.
that's, I mean, just again, like similar to when Lauren was talking, as you were talking, Bridget, I just wanted to come out of my skin a bit because I'm like, oh my goodness, these dilemmas are so real. But I think that's what we get to practice, whether we are single or married, is I need to take greater risks to be differentiated, to be authentic, but I also need to take great risks to belong somewhere.
Mm,
And
that's good.
that's where the strongest systems in the world are located is somehow you find a way to do both.
Yeah, that's good. It feels like it gives permission for the dating season to be, I don't know, the picture that's coming to mind is like a rock tumbler, right? I think a lot in the
Hmm.
faith space, it's like, guard people's heart and all these things, or puts all this high pressure of you got to figure everything out. And I think there's something really beautiful that I've experienced in my dating journey of like, I often will even say this with men that I date of like, the goal isn't that I marry you. The goal is that both of us get to the end of this a more full version of ourselves. And if that means two of us together, great. And if that means two of us separate, great. But like my goal in honoring you can't be an outcome or I haven't actually honored you. And that's really scary because it feels like it breaks so much of the the script that we've been giving that we're not allowed to. But I actually I don't know, I'd be curious on your thoughts about that as dating as a meaning making season for ourselves individually. And that's okay that we are on a self discovery journey in that process.
Yeah, it's all data. Who we are attracted to, what we're trying to work out. So, I mean, I think often, Bridget, you know this, that I love that example from Harry Potter, where Harry Potter looks into the mirror of Erised, and Erised
Mm.
is desire spelled backwards. And what does Harry see? He's an orphan and he sees his parents. But then when Ron Weasley is looking into the mirror of Erised, he sees like a much more narcissistic image of like he's the Quidditch champion, he's got a lot of friends, people love and adore him. And when you look at his backstory, it's like, he feels insignificant in the shadow of his brothers. And so the mirror of Erised is reflecting back to us our most ardent longings. And so sometimes the people that we are attracted to, sometimes the friendships that we pursue, we're working stuff out in it.
Yeah.
So I have dated some people because it was like, I just need to like date. Like I don't think my first girlfriend was not until, I don't know, some time in college, which felt late in the context that I grew up in Virginia, where people were dating in their, middle school, high school. So it was like that first one was like, I just need to move through this. And then there was
Yeah.
a sense of like waking up to, people used to call me Quality J. And that was one of the reasons why freshman year I couldn't get a date, is they were dating, the jocks, the cool guys, the
Wow.
badasses. But Quality
Yeah.
J was like the person that they wanted to be friends with, but never
Mm.
wanted to date. So I had this internalized self of like, I need more of an edge. And so then I
Mm.
started looking for someone that had more of an edge and more of that, Teflon type of experience. So it's all data, it's all grist for the mill, it's all development. And so, my enemies, my failures, my successes, the people that I've loved have all developed me. But I think we have to take that approach of, why am I drawn to this person? And part of what we know from psychology is that we are going to be drawn to people that are at equal levels of differentiation than us. And so, what that means is the reason why we are attracted to people is not always out of love, it's where we are underdeveloped. And I know that sounds cornering and insulting because in some ways it is, but there is an underdeveloped aspect that brings people together in as much as there is a divine spark and potential of intimacy. So I think back to my marriage, my provisional self, as I talked about with my mom, was I had a sixth sense for the needs of women, all the difficulties in their life. And so when I first started dating Heather, that was kind of the secret recipe that began our dating relationship. As I saw her in a moment of vulnerability and I engaged her, I think, pretty well, and that surprised her. But she also had something underdeveloped in her where she didn't know how to move through the difficulty that she was in and outsource that need for someone else to see her, to rescue her, to develop her. And so our stories lined up so well to create attraction, but also deep dread and misery. And so when she began to differentiate from me and didn't need me to be a particular way and had
Yeah.
interests and desires outside of me, I mean, that desperation and anger
Mm.
inside of me against her really came out of, wait a minute, like, don't grow, don't develop, don't have a sense of self here. I want you to just be, simultaneously needy, but also full of life. But that life can't be for outside of me. It only needs to be for me. And
Wow.
again, that's where a lot of my wounds were, where is there going to be any female, any adult that's going to see me, not just as quality, but someone that desires me, but also
Yeah.
deeply wants me?
Mm.
And,
Mm.
yeah, all I can say is marriage has taught me more than I ever wanted to know about myself and my
Mm.
wife.
You have that like perfect lining up of opportunity or, like you said earlier, or misery. And we'll keep it real that We
It's
have
both.
cycles of those things. We have cycles of both all the time. Yeah. I wonder, though these have been questions that you make you want to crawl out of your skin and run away from. I wonder in your practice and in
Keep
your work
going.
and your
I'm having to grow as I listen to you all talk.
in your practice with in your work with other people and your work in research for writing these amazing books, I wonder if you have identified or noticed particular markers, red flags, green flags, as it relates to a dater being able to show their ability to differentiate from their parents. Um, Maybe I could say it. Yeah, are there red or green flags that you think are super important, especially as it relates to desire for the daters that are listening?
Yeah, I think one of the directions that I go with that question was talking. I think you all have like just primed so many early dating examples between Heather and I. So that's what my memory is full of right now. But I remember at some point in grad school when Heather and I were dating, we both went to a place called the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology to essentially study under a guy by the name of Dan Allender. And Dan used to teach a class called Sexual Disorders. And I remember waiting for Heather outside of that class because we were going to go, I don't know, Trader Joe's or something, grab some groceries. The backstory of this is that my dad, who had been a pastor for 25, 30 years, decided to come out to the Seattle school to study as well, to get his master's in counseling. So Heather and my dad were both in that classroom. And Dan
Oh,
is
wow.
lecturing. I'm sitting outside
Oh
the,
my
the
goodness.
classroom, and Dan said, the bedroom is the noisiest room in the entire house. He's like, your porn history is there, your abuse history is there, your
Yeah.
mom is there, your dad is there, it's all there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my girlfriend and my father are both in the same
Wow.
class hearing this. And it's like, yes,
No.
that's absolutely it. So when I think about kind of red flags, green flags, to go back to your question, I think like that, green flags are you want to find someone that is deeply curious about who they are, where they come from, where they're going. And so someone that's like, oh, I had great parents that didn't affect me, or I had horrible parents and I'm just letting the past be the past. I would say that's like a yellow flag, that there's a sense of like, there's no curiosity to understand, like, how do you honor someone, but also be honest about what you've been through. And so just that sense of a green flag is like someone that's like, okay, this dating space, this potential of marriage, this theme of sexuality, my goodness, it is a crowded bedroom. There are a lot of different actors here. There are a lot of different dynamics. And so I think just some level of, I realize that I'm bringing debris into this
Yeah.
relationship with you. And there are some things that I'm aware of, but also some things that I'm not aware of that I am unable to see. So can our relationship be a place that both like allows me to be more curious about my past, be curious about some of the spots that I don't yet see, and then also, where are we moving with this life? So
Hmm.
what does your story reveal? What is so curiosity is just such an important trait. Contempt is almost always a red flag. And I say that as someone who has known a lot of self contempt and a lot of other centered contempt. If you want to know what destroys trust and intimacy, it's contempt. And so some of that is the invitation, again, not to pretend like you don't have any, but again, is there grief about your
Yeah.
contempt? Because contempt
Good.
is a little bit like smoke and fire, that
Mm.
sometimes you date people with high levels of self contempt and you're like, oh, it's just nice to not be like attacked by them. But
Mm.
wherever there's self contempt, it will eventually turn into other centered contempt. And if you're dealing with someone that has a lot of other centered contempt for you, it's stemming from a deep sense of self hatred at some place in their life. And so, Gottman's research and many others would just kind of say like contempt is going to ruin marriages in the first 6 years. It's a contempt based marriage that ruins. Later on, it's not contempt. It's called the neutral affective style is what implodes marriages in the later years. But the first 6 years, if you want to know what's going to predict your divorce, it's the level of contempt in your relationship.
And when you say contempt, I've always kind of defined it as like a turning against your desire.
It could be turning against your desire. It could be full of accusation for yourself, like, what the hell is wrong with me? I can't believe I
Yeah.
desire this. Or just, it's a type of criticism on steroids for the other person. It's like, you should be here for me. I can't believe you would do something like that.
Yeah.
Like, you are a horrible person. And I want you
Mm,
to kind of, it's a sense of like, you want to put the knife into someone and really twist it and make them feel ashamed of who they are, what they've done with their life. And so contempt is just it's very different than anger. One of the interesting things from John and Julie Gottman's most recent book on conflict is that they essentially labeled anger as an approach emotion. That people that have really good anger approach things. It shows you what they care about.
Mm,
So I'm not saying that you should not have anger in your relationship. Anger exposes what
yeah.
is important to each partner. But when anger begins to transition into a form of contempt, humiliation, name calling, degradation, a sense
Yeah.
of like, I will make you feel alien for who you are. That's really what we're talking about with regard to contempt, is it's no
Yeah.
longer about approaching someone. It's really about shaming someone.
Yeah. Good. It's, as you kind of talked about in the book, of each of these core desires overlap and impact, and you can't really have one without the other. And it all pushes on that. And, it's really interesting talking about just like creating relational safety and containment, like we've talked about, of does this person look at the story they've lived and can they own the places where they're contributing to harm in the relationship and trying to work out their own stuff. And so much of that shows up in their physical relationship. And this is still something I feel like I want to spend the next decade studying and trying to figure out is um I think one of the damages of purity culture is it had this idea that somehow you're starting from zero on the first time you have sex. But I always say, like, sexual trust is either built or broken long before your wedding night. Like, first of all, for you as individuals, but then how your ability to initiate and deal with rejection, like, all of those things are already coming up. And so, a lot of times when I'm talking with people is, they might say, well, I'm reserving sex for marriage, but then all my peers are saying, like, what if you're not sexually compatible? And oftentimes when people use that language, they're talking about the mechanics, not necessarily the heart of sex. And so, yeah, I think that is a really important thing to talk about is the person I'm dating a sexually mature person? And are they showing me signs that they will be a good and safe lover in sex, in creating a lifetime with me? Or are they already showing me signs? Because I see a lot of this too, especially I would say I see a lot of like even peers of we got married in Christian college and now it's been 15 years and now we've deconstructed and now we like everything that was taught to us about sexual ethic, we're just ditching all of it because if I hear this a lot is like if I would have been sexually active, I would have known that they were not sexually safe. And so a lot of
mm,
times I kind of talk through that of okay, well, what other dynamics were at play in the relationship that were pointing us towards this person is already screaming very, very loud with their behavior that it's not there. So, yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on that. And like, what does it mean for us as we're dating to really examine the sexual maturity of our partner, even if we're not sexually active with the person?
Mhm. Yeah, such a good question. And again, razor's edge, where we are not sexually developed. We're not sexually mature. So this is an unfolding process that
Yeah.
nothing will prepare you for good sex except for bad sex and good sex. And like it,
Yeah.
like I don't think about compatibility in terms of
Hmm.
the way that most people think about it. I think like we just need to like liberate ourselves to be able to say you're probably not going to be compatible. But then it's that sense of like almost any great story, right? Like the protagonist doesn't have the gifts, doesn't have the boon. That person develops them on the journey. And so that's part of the way that I think about kind of, I think you're completely right that there are clues, there are signs that you need to pay attention to, and don't be naive as you begin to see the patterns. So part of what happens with a lot of my clients that are married that walk through something like infidelity is, I'm going to stereotype here, but let's say that you have a husband that has an affair and you have a wife that's been betrayed. She undergoes a very real reality like betrayal trauma. But one of the difficulties that we almost always have to go through is we have to triage the marriage. We have to address safety, STIs, a sense of like, is this a safe marriage to stay in? But then we also have to get into the meaning of that affair for her. And the
Mhm.
meaning that I work a lot with in my couples intensives is a woman having a sense of like, I knew something was up, but I kept looking away. I knew something
Mm,
wasn't quite right, but I learned to look away. And that was about the
yeah.
partner that they chose. But dun dun dun, family of origin was the same way, that there were things about their mom, things about their dad that they did not like, that they could not speak to because
Yeah.
honesty was not valued in their family. It was seen as disrespect. And so
Mhm.
the pattern of growth for them is that yes, you looked away. You weren't just betrayed by your partner. There was
Mm,
also a level of self-abandonment and
Mhm.
self-betrayal here too. So yes, we want to clear out the debris of infidelity, but in doing so, we also have to look at some of the deeper patterns with regard to how you suppress what you know. And so
Yeah.
that's the sense of, we all have to recognize that we're going to have to grow. And marriage is a crucible. It's a stage that reveals who you are, it reveals where you come from. Sex and marriage provoke you to change to a better version of yourself, a more generous version of yourself. And I think it can actually heal you. I do believe that
Yeah.
sex, marriage, it can all be part of a healing process. But the dilemma is that we don't like things to be revealed about us that are
Yeah.
uncomfortable. We don't like to be provoked beyond our window of tolerance. And even though we say we want relationships to heal, all of us know that healing hurts like hell.
Yeah.
mm,
Once you begin to get into the patterns, the wounds, the heartache, and really the impossibility of moving forward with your life, it hurts. And so I do believe that, yeah, single or married, all of life is
Mhm.
revealing, provoking, and inviting us to healing. But as human beings, not just as married singles, we don't like
Yeah.
we don't like the revelations, provocations, and healing that life is trying to invite us to.
Yeah. It's good.
I really like the way you, in talking about that, Jay, really create space to say sex and marriage are not the only places that are crucibles. So in exploring, and this is, man, is it genius? What I really enjoy about your book is that like you're helping us recognize maybe as Christians, we have silent desire to be exclusively sexual. Like even when we talk about lust in scripture, we only make that about sexual lust and we miss out on these other areas. So in the same way that sex and marriage can be a crucible for growth, that's super scary. Our aspirations, our vocational aspiration, the other types of desire that you um, articulate for us in your book can become these crucibles, scary, but also invitation to live fully, live wholly, be complete um, in our walk.
Yeah, I have lusted after many things. I've lusted to get married, I've lusted to not be married, I've lusted for apple fritters, I've lusted for a better body. Like lust
Yeah.
is not just confined to these things, but desire is trying to wake us up. Like one of the things that I have thought a lot about through this project is, the parable of the talents that, there's this master that gives people talents. And what do they do with them? Some bury them and don't really develop them. And those are the harshest words that the master comes back with is you buried them. Some people begin to develop their talents, but all of us have been given talents, or another
Mhm.
word for that might be desires. And I think that's part of what the master will eventually ask us is what have you done with the desires inside of you? And if you think it's just about porn or sex, you will be mistaken. That there are desires for meaning and purpose and intimacy and healing and growth. And so desires, without desire, dating and desire podcast does not exist. Unwanted does not exist without it. And so as Christians, we often pathologize desire. Desire is the most beautiful dimension of your life is because of desire. Like all the best things in life are a result of desire. And so I want people to really have a holy, trembling approach to desire, that the issue is not that you desire too much, as C.S. Lewis would say. The core issue is that you have desired a life that's far too small, a
Mhm.
relationship that's far too small, a sense of the kingdom of God that's far too small. So the poet Rilke had this great line where he said, "The purpose of life is to be defeated by ever greater and greater things."
Mm,
And if you're feeling unsatisfied in your life, if you're feeling unfulfilled, more than likely, it's not only because you have a God shaped hole inside your heart, it's that you have allowed your life to be defeated by lesser things. And so part of that emptiness, part of the lack of satisfaction in your life is trying to wake you up to a fuller life that is full of risk and full of desire. So I think desire is stunning, and it haunts me to leave it underdeveloped.
right.
So you've been so kind as we've been chatting just to kind of even share as we're talking what comes up for you. But I'm really curious if you were to look at this journey of writing desire, what has changed the most in your own heart, in your own story as giving yourself over to this writing
Hmm.
journey?
Yeah. Oh, so many things. I would say that I wouldn't say that I'm in a midlife crisis, but what I can tell you is I'm in a midlife chrysalis, maybe close to crisis. And I'm not about to sabotage my life in a profound way. But part of what I've had to understand is, I've talked about this provisional self, and the provisional self, it's temporary. It's not my real self. And so, in many ways, I've written a book that I knew that my clients needed, but I also needed this book as well. Like, I have all this debris of my life of trying to like understand the stories that need to heal, and then that second core desire is that of personal growth. And how do I grow? And we are in a day and age with a lot of sound bites around how to grow. Like, here are the protocols and sunlight, and how to like optimizing your health as a man in his 40s is like the new midlife. It's the new Corvette. Like, you don't get a Corvette, you just get Brian Johnson blueprint, live forever, get your whoop on your wrist.
Yeah.
And, that optimization is growth. But it's like, no, like we want to be defeated by something even greater than this. So this book has been a mirror back to me of some of the places that I am under indexed. And
Mm.
I've over indexed in my career at different points to write books, to be able to do really good work in the world. But I've had to face a lot of my own loneliness in friendships. I've had to
Mm,
address, like, I can be wise and competent and commit to my own growth, but then how does that growth actually intersect with that capacity to love
Yeah.
others better and love my wife, love my kids more. And the more that I love my kids, the more that they expose back to me all these places in my own childhood that are underdeveloped. So I think this book has probably initiated something of a chrysalis in me. And
yeah.
that's scary. If you're thinking about ordering this book, that's part of the like, do you want your life disrupted? And there was a poem that I came across when I first started this book project, and it was essentially about living between worlds. And they said, we all live between worlds. One world is dead, and the other world is powerless to be born. And I felt cornered, where I'm like, I can't go back to this former way of life, provisional self, just like good insight. I have to move forward, but I don't feel like I have the goods. I don't feel like I have the maturity. I don't feel like I have the gifts to be able to move into honoring the fullness of the terrain that I think God has put inside my heart. So
Mm.
this book has worked on me. I've had dark days with this. I've had glorious days with this, but I just didn't think it would expose just how much desire is inside of me. And, as the proverb says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. So to uncover the fullness of the desires within me, but also not entirely know how to move forward into them can make my heart and my body sick. So I've
Yeah.
learned a lot in this project. I would say
Mm.
more than I learned in Unwanted.
Wow. Well, we're really grateful. It's, been a
Yeah,
gift to
so
my life
tender.
and excited for the way that it's going to just change the conversation for our listeners and being able to step into the middle path, which is not to run away and not to stay stuck, but to stay present and stay curious. And yeah, really looking forward to that.
Bridget and Lauren, thank you so much for having me and making me so uncomfortable with your great questions and just dynamics that I haven't thought about and dynamics that the two of you are in that I don't even have insights into. So I think it would be like, yeah, turning the questions back to you all as well to say, what on earth are you all uncovering as you're in the modern dating world?
You want to go, Lauren?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think a lot about people in the church and this dating journey specifically, and like Jay, the assault on desire and how that has undercut and separated us from the good things that God has for us breaks my heart. And so I feel like I am observing men and women who want good things. And because of the way we've talked about desire, the only option that they have to believe is I'm messed up. I'm so especially broken and deficient. And so I suck at life. I'm a loser. I don't get to have. And
Hmm.
and and that hurt, that pain is not always on the surface. Um, but I find that underneath, that's what we're. I feel like I'm doing spiritual warfare against that, both to bring it to the surface and to say it's a lie, and to my big passion is to very practically engage with the process that is in a dignifying way, both for the dater and the datee, the person that they're dating. And so I think I'm uncovering that this is not superfluous for the church. This is a discipleship crisis.
Hmm.
um, and we have to stop making singles and daters the butts of jokes and
Hmm.
taking advantage of what it feels like to say, I've arrived. I don't know what it's like for you anymore. I'm so glad I'm out. And instead say, the kingdom of God is, I think Jesus is the victor. He will win. He is winning. He has won. But also, there's something of the kingdom of God that's at risk when we don't act
Hmm.
like this matters. And
Yeah.
so, I'm, yeah, those are some of the things that I'm covering. You can tell I'm very passionate about doing
So good.
battle in
Yeah.
this area because it's been too long that we've not been willing to do the work and be disciplined to as a church to engage in this area.
Well said. Yes.
Mm.
Wow. Love
Bridget,
it.
what about
So
you?
good. Yeah, I feel ooey gooey about it. Like I have this phrase that goes to my brain is like, what does it look like to disciple a generation in the art of learning to share your skin? That there's
Mm,
something really beautiful in like the what gets provoked in you in those beginning experiences of holding hands and kissing and making out and how are we doing that and what are our bed boundaries and like all of those conversations. um, they're really delicious and they can be a really beautiful part of your sexual discipleship, but we don't like we would rather just have a list of rules of like this is sinful, this is not sinful. And so like really trying to help people of like if you're asking the question of like how far is too far, like you really have missed the whole point. And so helping people shift to like what creates flourishing, what helps us cultivate connection. How do I move through those things of like, oh my gosh, like I all of a sudden got hit with fear that porn's going to be on your phone and I feel guilt because I know that's not part of your story, but it's part of my ex's story. And now I'm flooded and oh gosh, I am feeling a lot of desire to kiss you, but we also said we've only been dating for a little bit, so I'm not quite ready for that. But then I want to share it with you so it's not sitting in my body and oh no, you can feel my erection, but like, are you okay with that? And like just all of these things that literally no one talks to us about. those are the things that keep me up at night of what does it mean to disciple people in building sexual trust, in
Yeah.
learning it's an art form. It is an art form in learning to share yourself. And I always say, like, our bodies tell our stories, and how we share our body is how we share our story. And that makes the conversation about boundaries way more fun. I'll, lots more I could say, but it's coming to mind.
Yeah.
Jay, I'm telling the world that you say this, but I don't actually know if you do. There is a quote,
I may not know either.
There's a quote that I think comes from one of the video series in Unwanted, because I have a text message to my best friend saying, Jay Stringer, good boundaries expand the possibilities of play.
Think so. Maybe. Could have been anybody.
But
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm just telling the world that you said that because I somehow heard it in the Unwanted series. But yeah, I think that hinge opened up the whole conversation for me, is what does it look like to expand the possibilities of play, that purity is not boring,
Yes.
that we can
Yeah.
have sexual ethics that are delicious and fun and flirty and good and still align with our values.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. Because desires have to be developed at any stage of your life to grow.
Yeah.
Like, they have to be disciplined, they have to be taught. And so there's always this interplay between, I don't need to pathologize my desire, but maybe this one does need to be developed. And so that's where, like I don't want to get off too much into this, but there's a Catholic theologian, Ronald Rolheiser, that just talks about, like, kids are born with raw desires. And the purpose of the family and the church is to connect those raw desires to community life. So if you have a raw desire for food, great, but connect it to the table and host people and enjoy
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So if you might love the food, but don't do it in secret. Don't do it just by yourself. Like,
Yeah.
there's a time and a place for that, but also increase uh, the table that you are
Mhm.
offering to the world. So, but
Mm.
thank you to both of you. I mean, I think of
Yes.
that German quote of, like, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And I think that's what I'm hearing from both of you, is that this world of dating just does not have enough language to it. And so just what I heard from both of you is, like, you are providing language to help people to understand the complex and glorious worlds that they are inheriting and they're dating through. And as Lauren said, this is of utmost importance.
Mhm.
Amazing.
Thank you for reflecting that back to us, Jay. Really kind, and appreciate your presence with us. For those who are listening and want to stay connected with you and your work, how could they do that?
So you can go to my website, which is jay-stringer.com. There's another Jay Stringer that is a British crime fiction novelist that he beat me to all the social handles. So JAY_Stringer_ will get you to Instagram, but my website has all things, kind of books, intensives, trainings, courses, all available on that hub.
Thank you so much. I know you're going to keep blessing our listeners and all those that can engage with this work. So thank you again so much for sharing, going into the chrysalis. We are blessed by your willingness to do that.
Such an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks so much for spending your time with us today. If this conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or helped you feel a little less alone in your dating journey, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who might also need the encouragement. You'll find links in the show notes to connect with today's guest, as well as other ways to work with Lauren and me through coaching and other opportunities designed to support you in dating with clarity, trust, and integrity. We believe you don't have to shut down your desire or abandon your values to build a meaningful connection. And we're honored to walk alongside you as you navigate that journey. You can also find us on Instagram at Dating and Desire, where we'll continue the conversation. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.